name is Jackie Lee, and I'm the Horticulture IPM Specialist for the University of Arkansas Cooperative Extension Service. And today I'd like to talk to you about some pesky pests that you may encounter in dormancy in blackberry production. So first off, just a little bit about integrated pest management. Here's a long definition. It basically says that it's using more than one tactic to control a pest. And these tactics are selected and applied in a manner that minimizes risk to human health, beneficials, non-target organisms, and the environment. I like to show this pyramid. It shows you how you can start practicing IPM with cultural control methods, and these help minimize conditions that the pest needs to live, such as water, food, and shelter. Some examples of this is removing debris that insects may overwinter in, sanitation, resistant varieties, crop rotation, and plant health. Another example of integrated pest management tactics is physical and mechanical means. These prevent pest access. These are things like row covers, bird netting, hand removal of pests, trapping, and tillage. Biological control is the use of predators, parasites, or diseases in a targeted way to help suppress a pest. And then our last method is chemical control. And chemical control is only applied in integrated pest management if the pest reaches an economic threshold. And there's different types of chemical control. We have conventional chemical control, which is where the chemical that is applied is synthetic. And then we have organic, which means that the chemical is naturally occurring. There's also some chemicals that are classified as biorational, and these are less detrimental to natural enemies. They're usually classified as a repellent, diatomaceous earth. Some of them are oils, insect growth regulators, and microbials are all classified as biorational. One thing I like to remind stakeholders is that pesticides are highly regulated by the EPA. A lot of folks don't know this. All pesticides must be registered by the EPA, and it involves extensive environmental testing. It's usually 7 to 10 years at least, and about $15 million that goes into each product. Tolerances are established for every crop. And some examples are maximum residue levels. This is the maximum residue that can be found on a crop that will not cause any damage to humans. Pre-harvest interval is the time from spray till the time that you can harvest that plant in order to stay under those tolerance levels. Restricted entry interval is the time period between when you spray and when you can re-enter the area without any personal protective equipment. A lot of people think that pesticides is all insecticides, but really pesticides is a collective term for herbicides, which control weeds, insecticides, which control insects, and then fungicides, which control diseases. So how do they work? They work in many different ways. They interfere with a biological process necessary for life. Pesticide, it means to kill a pest. So it has to interfere with something to kill that pest species. Contact means that the pest must be contacted by the pesticide. This also means that the pest must be present if you're using a contact pesticide. Ingestion is also a means that a pesticide can work. This means that the pest must eat the pesticide. Some pesticides are also systemic, which means that they're translocated or absorbed in the plant and they can move throughout the entire plant. Some pesticides are selective, and what this means is that they do not kill everything that's out there. And an example of this would be 2,4-D. It only targets broadleaf weeds and not the grasses. When we talk about non-selective pesticides, an example would be glyphosate. Glyphosate will kill grasses, broadleaves, almost anything it contacts. Pesticides can also be residual, which means that they persist in the environment for some time. And a residual pesticide can be used when the pest is not present. Non-residual means that the pest must be present, it's usually contact, and it does not persist in the environment. Every pesticide has a label, and the label is the law, and on that label there are signal words that signify how toxic that pesticide is. Now, most of the pesticides we deal with now all have the caution label, which means it's slightly toxic. And some are warning, a few are danger or danger poison, and the one that we use the most in specialty crops is gramoxone. To apply a restricted use pesticide, you must have a certification, and these are things like gramoxone and Lorsban. Both of those are restricted use pesticides. Also, there are worker protection standards that must be met. Each state has their own regulations, so make sure that you get with your pesticide safety educator to learn more about those. One thing that's important when dealing with pesticides is resistance management. We need to only use pesticides when necessary. That's why it's important to follow an integrated pest management program. You want to make sure and use the appropriate material for the pest and also the recommended rate. If you need more than one treatment when the same pest is present, you need to rotate that pesticide's mode of action. And in order to do this, you can look at the IRAC or FRAC numbers and rotate among those. These numbers are all listed in the Integrated Management Guide that you can download from the Southern Region Small Fruit Consortium website. And then the picture on the right shows an example of how resistance can build in an insect population. You see the first picture in the top left, a spray is applied, and then you see that the little red insect is resistant, and there's only one. Then we put out a second spray. After that red one has reproduced, now we have 4 that are resistant and only 1 that is susceptible. So you can see how over time resistance can build quite quickly. Here's an example of the chart in the spray guide that you can download in the Southern Region Small Fruit Consortium website. This is a great spray guide that focuses just on brambles. In the column that has comments in the header, there is the IRAC and FRAC numbers listed in those columns, so you can easily choose how to rotate among them. Next, I'd like to talk about the pre-transplant and transplant period for blackberries. Disease management is going to be one of the most important issues. If you can, destroy all wild brambles within about 600 foot of commercial production. This can be pretty impossible if there's forested areas around, but you can always maintain a nice clean fence row at least. Locate the planting in direct sunlight with adequate air circulation, and this helps the plants dry quicker, which decreases the amount of disease issues that you're going to have. Purchase plants from a reputable source. Tissue culture plants are what is recommended. And do not plant blackberries immediately after eggplant, tomato, or potato, because they are very susceptible to verticillium infection. You want to wait 3 to 4 years with a non-vert crop before you plant blackberry. Virus and crown gall can be a big issue, and one thing to keep in mind is that there's no cure for virus and crown gall except removing the symptomatic plants. This is where tissue cultured plants are going to help you out. They're a lot more likely to be free of virus and crown gall. Destruction of the wild blackberries that may harbor these viruses. Nematode control. Nematode control before you plant is important. The dagger nematode does vector a lot of different blackberry viruses. And you can see the picture on the left is an example of crown gall, and then the picture on the right is an example of some blackberry virus. So nematodes, what do? They can directly destroy the roots of the plant. The damage can actually increase crown gall, and they can spread bramble viruses, and the dagger nematode is the one that is especially problematic. And you can see on the picture to the right is an example of berries produced by a plant that is infected with a virus. About the only control is telone, and this is pre-plant only. So virus and crown gall, they enter through a wound on that plant. So it's very important to minimize wounds on those lower canes and the roots. So try to avoid cultivation for weed control and using a weed eater up really close next to the plant base. Gramoxone, if you're going to spray gramoxone for weed cleanup, try to avoid getting it on those lower canes, because gramoxone will cause lesions that the viruses can actually get into the plant from. You want to prune the plant when you have 2 to 3 days of sunny weather. Sterilize the pruners after each plant to prevent cross-contamination of those viruses. You can use rubbing alcohol, a 50% solution, 1 part alcohol, 1 part water, works really well. Crown gall, there are some biological control methods. You can dip root cuttings in gall control or no gall suspensions. A 100-gram pack of no gall with 1 gallon of water treats up to about 2,000 cuttings, so quite a lot. And this is about $20 per 100 grams. Next up, Phytopthora, which is root rot. This is when the primocanes begin to wilt and the shoot tips die back. You can see in the picture to the left. The floricanes have very weak lateral shoots, and the leaves turn yellow and they look scorched around the leaf margins. Root rot it's generally a problem in very poorly drained, low-lying areas. Provisions for adequate drainage must be a priority, and this must be planned out before planting. Treatment with fungicides is not very effective for reversing root rot damage, especially if there's severe symptoms present. Ridamil Gold and Alliette are both registered, and they do a good job when the symptoms are mild. So, what's going on in the dormant season? We have to worry about Anthracnose. This is a major disease in the southeast. The fungus overwinters in old canes. And this fungus spreads by spores, by pruners, wind, and rain. There's some cultural management tactics. You can remove those old floricanes and the infected primocanes and destroy them by burning them or burying them. And here's an example of what anthracnose looks like. You can see an infected fruit in the top left, And then on the top right, you can see the gray lesions with the purple. And then sometimes you'll see the drupelets actually look like they're drying out. And every once in a while you'll see lesions on the leaves as well, and they manifest as just little purple spots. There's insects that you can help control for during the dormant period. Raspberry cane borer and redneck cane borer are some. Any infested canes you can just prune out and destroy. The redneck cane borer causes a gall. Usually it's in the bottom 12 inches of the cane, and you can see a picture of a redneck cane borer gall in that picture on the lower right. I've done quite a bit of research on redneck cane borer. I looked to see if I could find any varieties that were resistant to redneck cane borer, and pretty much what I found was that the only variety that showed some resistance was Tupi. Everything else pretty much was susceptible. Another thing I've had growers tell me is that the canes that are infested with redneck cane borer produce just fine. And I wanted to look at this, so I looked at non-infested and infested canes at their production. And what I found, you can see the purple, the non-infested canes produce significantly more than the infested canes. The infested canes pretty much did not produce anything at all, or very little. So it's important to just prune out those canes. They're not going to produce much anyway. Raspberry crown borer. Raspberry crown borer is an insect, it's actually a moth that resembles a wasp. And what this guy does is lays eggs underneath the leaves, and the larvae burrow in the crowns and feed up into the canes. And a lot of times when you have raspberry crown borer, you'll see a lot of cane dieback, and you'll see the shepherd's crook appearance. And you can see that in the picture on the bottom right. So in the dormant period, you want to remove infested canes. So any of those canes that look dead and have a crooked top. Chemical management you want to apply in the fall, Asana, Alticore, Brigade, or Sniper, and apply with at least 50 gallons of water per acre. And you want to use a flood nozzle to apply a continuous band that's directed at the base of the plants. A research project I did was looking at timing for raspberry crown borer control, and what we found is timing really is everything. So a fall application was much more effective than an early spring application. And Brigade worked very well. Next up is delayed dormant. So one of our delayed dormant applications is for Anthracnose, and the timing is very critical for this. You want to spray at green tip no more than 3/4 of the green tissue visible. You can do additional applications when the primocanes are about 6 inches tall, and then again at 14-day intervals through harvest. And I would recommend this if your anthracnose pressure is pretty high and you're seeing lesions on a lot of the canes. The compounds that you can use for anthracnose is copper compounds, lime sulfur, and sulfuric. Another issue that we face in Arkansas is fire ants. And I'm sure a lot of folks in the southeast face the same issue. One thing I like to remind everyone is that using a granular bait product seems to work alright. You want to make sure that it is registered for cropland, and there are a few available, and these are Extinguish or Exteam ant bait. Weed management is very important during the dormant season. And then also just for prep. before you plant your blackberries. You can use landscape fabric, mulch. Also prepare the site by burning down all the weeds with glyphosate, and you want to do that before the plants are in the ground. You never want to spray glyphosate around plants that are already in the ground. Blackberries are very susceptible to glyphosate injury. Pre-emergent herbicides are a really good option. You can apply these before weeds emerge, and it lasts for about 6 to 8 weeks. And you can see a list of products that are labeled in the southern region IPM guide for brambles. And then most states also have a spray guide that lists herbicides that are registered in their area. And be sure to follow the crop age restrictions on that herbicide label, because there are quite a few restrictions for blackberry. And here's just some examples of black landscape fabric, mulch, and then that bottom picture shows a burn down with glyphosate. A picture of a farm that has very good weed management. Usually landscape fabric, herbicides, and then mowing is all used together.